Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the seminar co-hosted by the New Ventures Legal Team and the Center for Legal Innovation and Digital Society here at Chinese University of Hong Kong Faculty of Law. Today, we have the great honor to have Professor Benjamin Tsou here to talk about the challenges and the rewards in cultivation and management of Chinese English patents in the age of big data. Professor Tsou is a chair professor in the City University of Hong Kong, and he is also a graduate in Berkeley and Harvard. So he, of course, is very prestigious in his field of computational linguistics. And other than that, he is also a very, very successful entrepreneur. I have the pleasure to meet him in our IP conference this summer, and I was so impressed with his professional knowledge and the passion for this new AI knowledge as well as entrepreneur experience. So that is why I invited him here to share his insight with our New Venture Legal Team's members and also the audience online, so to our research center. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Professor Tsou.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Lee. It's a pleasure to be here again. I think it was just a few months ago, right? We met here. Okay, as Professor Lee has said, my background is not in law. I have dabbled a bit in things related to law, but more importantly, my work is mostly in linguistics and in computational linguistics. So what I thought I'll share with you some of the work we've been doing in the last more than 10 years, actually, about working with bilingual patents, English and Chinese patents, from using computer to process them, to manage them, to translate. And then more recently, we have obtained a grant from the Hong Kong Innovation and Technology, ITC, Innovation Technology Commission, to develop post-editing. I'll explain what we are doing. So what I cover would be about some areas. We talk about the importance of IP, intellectual property rights, and patents in this 21st century. And we'll compare some of the notable advances in technology that would be relevant to dealing with patents, translations, and others. And then we talk about practical considerations when we deal with translation. So there are things like in anything, you have to deal with quality control. For that, you have to deal with quality assessment. You'll be able to assess how good the quality of a system is. And then you deal with quality assurance. How do you improve, be sure that the quality is adequate enough? Of course, the all-important factor of cost. Then I will touch on comparing actually some machine translation tools. That's what MT stands for. You might have heard of now, for example, ChatGPT will do translation too, as well as Google and others. And Baidu is a famous one from China. Then we have to talk about, most people don't talk about it in the technical field, is what exactly are some of the basic parameters in translation. And here the famous I think fidelity, 信达雅, those of you who have done anything in translation have come across it. Fidelity, fluency, and elegance in a translation. And then we'll talk about the big data approach that we have and generative artificial intelligence. Then a little bit about the future pipeline before I come to concluding remarks. If you have any questions, you're welcome to raise them as we go along. So let's first start out with looking at patents. Patents were around for more than 100 years, began in 1883. And you can see the graph here. The growth is phenomenal. You look at the one that's showing the greatest growth, and that's from China. in the last 10 years, you can see the growth of patents in China is more than the combination of all the other countries. This is really phenomenal. And there are all kinds of reasons for it, but we don't have to go into, just to note that patents can be very sizable. And they come from different companies. So for example, the biggest is Huawei in China, the 10 applicants. For example, Huawei is engaged in I suppose, in court cases with Apple and with Samsung about phone, patents related to the phone. And so next to Huawei is Samsung, Mitsubishi, LG, Qualcomm, Ericsson, BOE, Oppo, Sony, and Panasonic. It's amazing. You've heard of how Japan has really moved ahead to 2-3 decades ago, but in terms of new technology, it's behind China and the US to some extent. So this is a landscape, the picture of the current top applicants for patents. Now, the question you might not be totally familiar with, maybe you could explore a bit. What are patents? So a patent, basically, first line defines in the US, most people follow that. It gives the inventor the right to exclude others from making, using, offering for sale, or selling any invention or importing them into the country where it's applied. So they have control exclusive rights. And then you can see there's a lot of commercial value in this if you're successful in dealing with it. In fact, you can buy and sell patents. In fact, a company's assets may also include patents. That's quite an important factor, in fact, when people can borrow money from it. So this is basically what patents are. And then we can look at why are they valuable? They're valuable because they have exclusive rights in dealing with certain inventions, the intellectual property rights. They can be sold and bought, and they are valid only, very importantly, only in the country in which they are filed. So you file the patent in England but not in America, then you lose out. If it's infringement, it's in America. And also, of course, that come along with that is language. And when we deal with the Chinese-English context, if a patent is first written in English and then filed in China in Chinese, there's always a possibility where there are semantic differences, nuances that are not captured. Those would be the food for thought. Those would be the source of income for lawyers like yourselves when they have debates and quarrels on that. So the thing to remember then, patents are important legal instruments. They involve technical matters. In fact, the advances in technology and science are very often can be found. They can be very often found in patents, because that's where and this is where, as linguists, our interests we began looking at patents from that context after first look at law. So then let me come to, now, here is where we say, what are comparable patents? A patent that's filed in English in America can be also filed in China. Then sometimes they're totally comparable, just a translation. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes a patent filed in America can be filed as 2 patents in China. They protect different things. They obscure different things. The patent, what is good? Good patent is that it protects what you want to protect, but it does not reveal what you don't want others to know. That's the difficult part. This is what patent attorneys and agents do. So these patents are long documents. On the right-hand side is an example. There's translation involved. The cross-lingual management is difficult and takes time, and the cost is very high. It's among the highest. A legal firm, a lawyer firm dealing with patents can charge us thousands of dollars. But of course, not just for the translation, but also for mediating in terms of the technical, legal difficulties. So the translation has to be very accurate for the purpose in protecting the rights, and any mistake can result in very loss. And this is where the source of debate and litigations are. So we know, for example, in the present context, for the last 10 years or so, the US and China have been tussling each other in terms of technical advantage. I think America claims China to be infringing patent rights, etc. So far, they're mostly arbitration, not that many legal cases. I think between Apple and Samsung, there have been legal cases. So once you deal with arbitration, again, it's restricted in terms of the locality and the language. So a patent may be first filed in America, but the infringement is indicated in China. Then if the arbitration is China, then it goes by the Chinese version. You cannot claim and say the original version had this intention. That does not apply. So it's very specific language and country. So, but this means, given the current atmosphere, I guess we'll know in a few days whether Trump is going to come back and prolong this kind of arguments. But there's increasing volume you can see the Chinese patents being increased in number of applications. There's urgency now because of various competitions. And there's a question of fidelity, because it's only when they are not sufficiently faithful to the original would you have this kind of debates. So this involves technical materials and patents. And not just patents, but also manuals. If you file IPO, there would be technical sections that are also important for protection. So let's take a pause, and now you have all heard about you have heard about the big data, generative AI. These are new technologies that appear only, really come into prominence only in the last few years. But what exactly does technology do in terms of the matters we are interested in? So let's take a background look at something else. Look at some other technology that we have experienced in I think longer than our lifetime. For example, in laundry, in the very old days, I don't think any of you saw this. But if you look at old pictures, others, this is what people did. A piece of stone, slab, water, and just massaging the material to get rid of the dirt. Then you have very primitive tools like the washboard. Then you have beginning to have first washing machine. You find here, there's a picture of it. It goes on to the automatic washing machines, I think that you are more familiar with. It goes on from washing machine to wash dryers. You have go on. And finally, you get very fancy steam engines for molding instead of ironing. Do note that this is one way. You don't go backwards in this kind. This is one unidirectional. So this is in terms of one time. If you look at transportation too, from the days when people use their feet to the little barrels they push around to getting horses and then carriage and other things, most recently, the electric vehicle. These are all developments in different directions. Now, if you look at translation language, imagine when the first encounter between people of different languages are involved, they just point at each other, point at the nose, point at the mouth if they're hungry. That's the level of communication. There's no technology. Very primitive communication. Then it goes on with dictionaries. People have written dictionary. This is the earliest Chinese dictionary about five centuries ago. Then you have more modern printed dictionaries, like the Oxford English Dictionary, and my group has some contribution to this. So these are printed material. You can use it when you're at the table, others. Then then we have the electronic dictionary. Very handy little gadgets you can use to check things. Then the next big step is when it's incorporated into word processing. You don't have to carry it around, you never transferred it. It's already in the database. You can access it and bring about. Then from that, you go on to translation you now have. Now, no doubt, we have all seen there's a lot of provision about automatic translation. On the Google, others, you go on the internet, you can find. They claim to be very good to be automatic, but actually that's not the case. We're really at a stage what I call stage 4.5. This is how you maximize, you bridge the gap between the computer output and what is finally the acceptable output that we call post-editing necessary. So this is one progression in terms of technology or language technology. Now, if we look at basically what are some of the major changes, in the translation landscape, the technical advancement. One is you heard of machine learning. They use computer to learn things. Next is artificial intelligence, which involves machine learning. And then neural machine translation, from manual translation to sentence translation to statistical translation, and now to neural translation. Then we have big data curation. The big idea is that the computer will be like the human being. It learns things faster, it has a better memory, and so it has big data and can make use of the big data. It will not get tired. Oops, how come it moves on? Okay, then at the same time, we've seen there's increased this technical advancement, then there's increased demand and reliance on the machine to do it. And then the developments are enhancement in domain. Right? At the moment, you can translate chatbot, you can translate emails easily, quite accurate, quite satisfactory. But the domain has to be expanded. When you expand the domain to be involving patents, that is totally different picture. But that is gradually taking place. Next is speed and quality. Then what is most important that the modern system now have is provides feedback loop, because when you use Google Translate, it gives you a translation. There's no use, not much possibility for you to feedback and interact with it. But whereas a translator, in actual fact, sitting down, that person would be interacting with the dictionary, looking back and forth. And then, of course, there's a perennial linguistic challenge that is against man and machine. Can a machine ever replace man? People talk about artificial intelligence, but the ultimate challenge in artificial intelligence is natural language. You can bypass, if the machine can replace a human being in dealing with natural language, then you have totally succeeded. So let me give you a comparison here now. If you, the practical challenges, so you can have simple translations dealing with video subtitles of in movies or video games involving another language, social media, your emails, chat box. These are simple translation. The requirements are not that great, right? You can accept what Google might provide for you. But then if you look at the difficult ones, like legal documents, contracts, patents, the requirements are much more strong, strict. And the financial documents, like fintech documents, regulatory filings, technical manual, these are very difficult. What we call high risk and low risk. If you make mistakes in a simple translation, it's not so bad. But these are high risk, difficult translations. You cannot afford to make mistakes in the legal documents, cannot afford to make mistakes in financial documents. So there are two types of translation in terms of requirements. Now, what happens is, when you talk about translation, in fact, there are two very important considerations. One is cost, high cost versus low cost. The high costs are, for example, legal documents, financial documents, where full human translation are very important, to low cost, like the video subtitling, social media, and things at low cost. Then there's the quality. Oops, how come it moves? I think maybe you have a very good system here. Okay, This is cost, quality. The quality requirements are very high for legal patent documents and not as high for in terms of the subtitles and things of that kind. So machine translation can do it. But what is needed in the latest technology that's involved, and we try to contribute to that, is when you try to maintain the quality, but you move the cost factor, reduce it. The machine is able to do a lot of it now, but not enough in terms of difficult technical material. And this is what we should do and can do, and would be something that would be happening soon in terms of bringing down the cost, but maintaining the quality through machines. So now we ask ourselves, what about, so to do that, how do you talk about whether a translation is good or bad? Usually when you ask two different people about translation, they have very different opinions. One will say this is good and the other one will say this is no good. It's entirely subjective. So how do you go about it to find the most reliable way to deal with translation quality? Would it be subjective? You can ask a very experienced translator to do it, and the person says A is good. But then if you ask another experienced translator, that person may say it's no good, something else. Are there more objective ways? So far, that's not the one that's been discussed. I'll come into it. Then the next, after you've done quality assessment, how do you go about quality assurance to optimize the output? So should there be post human involvement? Most of the systems like Google Translate, others, they claim they have reached 90%, 80%. You don't need it. But really, at post-editing, the ultimate mile, the last mile, you need this kind of intervention, as I hope I will show you. So let me give you a practical example of evaluation. So what we have done is we've taken 3,000 sentences on patents that we work on. We have worked on the, 300 some thousand patents, and from that we have dealt with sentences using machine. So this is an example. We pick out 3,000 sentences on patents, English and Chinese. And because the patents are registered in America and also in Peking, they should be the top quality professionally. You can't expect any more. So they provide the basis. So in the past, traditionally, they provide a gold standard for comparison. So using this, the plot becomes interesting. What you find is on the left-hand side is a Google GPT score compared to the performance of GPT on the left-hand side, and the horizontal one is Google. What this means is that if the sentences are all perfect, then everything is on the top, 100%, right? Go to the one. One means it's perfect, 100%. If 0 means it's totally no good. So somewhere in between is the index they use. So if they're perfect, everything should be clustered around the top. But in fact, you don't. You find a lot of it in the bottom, a lot in the middle. This means a lot of the sentences are not comparable. Different, but the Google Translate GPT does a bit better than the Google Blue Score because it's higher up there, right? Can you see it? Okay. So this is a simple measure. Here you might want to know a bit more about how this is done. The Google, this kind of Blue Score matching comparison is based on comparing sentence A in English, sentence B in translation in Chinese of a particular system. They say how close they are. Something, the algorithm, the research has done is similar to what we do in dealing with plagiarism. How close is your target to what you have produced? The same way it is done. And so this shows, and also when the Blue Score is 5, it means half, 50% is usable. But when you have 50%, it doesn't mean half of the sentences are usable. It could be some sentences are 60% matching with the gold standard, some only 40%, so average of 50. So it's not an easy way to measure things. This is why there has been so much debate and concern about how good the measure for blue score is, because it's basically subjective. It's based on gold standard of people who have worked on it and who have filed the patents, and they are considered a gold standard. So there are questions like that. So we have compared GPT with Google, and let's look at some other cases. That is, this is GPT against Google in terms of Chinese to English sentences. Now, next is you look at English to Chinese sentences. The average score is different. And where here you can see that, so ChatGPT is not as good as it did before. Google is a bit better. Let's go on further. We look at Baidu, GPT against Baidu, and Baidu, they are average. And then in case of you deal with English to Chinese, ChatGPT, yes, Baidu does a little bit better than ChatGPT. So what is important here is to know in all cases, the overlap can be significant, but they are not. They show they are not that useful. This is why people cannot have cannot agree in terms of output. These are subjective, comparing subjective judgments with each other. If you're not sure about this, please raise it and I'll try to deal with it. So then what we're talking about in terms of really when we talk about cross-lingual management translation, what are we concerned about? It's well known that there are three very basic tenets. The one is fidelity, 信. How accurate is the translation? How accurate is the translation compared to the original? Next is fluency. When you read it, it's don't read smoothly, so it's not fluent, but the words might be right. Third is elegance, that's hard. I mean, you cannot translate poetry in terms of prose or vice versa. That has to be matching in terms of register. So there are three very basic tenets that we have to look at when you look at translation. So what has the recent development in the big data and generative AI done? What is shown is that it has improved fluency greatly, because now you take any kind of machine output, it reads quite smoothly, right, than before. In the past, it's not that smooth. Now it's quite smooth. That's fluency. But it doesn't mean it's always accurate. This is where the fidelity problem is not, there are problems with translation. So fluency has been improved. It will improve further with this big data, large language model dealing with. Fidelity, that's inadequate improvement, and it remains always as a challenge. Elegance, I think that is really not something we could be talking about now. So the important thing is the fidelity problem. So, thank you. Accuracy, whether the translation, especially in scientific and technical documents. Your fluency might not be so good, but if the accuracy is problematical, then the whole purpose of the piece would be defeated. So let me give you some examples. Why are there problems like this? Why is there a problem with fidelity? If you look at, this is going from English to Chinese, and the term is error detection in English. You find in Chinese, there are at least 4 different renditions, right? 检错, 检误, 错误测试, 检测, 4 different renditions, and this is fine in the patents we have. But what is interesting is we find there are percentages in terms of frequency. So the most frequent translation, 39%, is number 1. And number 2 is 26. So there's variation in this. What this means is based on 150 300,000 patents, different people involved. There are 39% of them rendered as the #1 translation. So this is a more objective base than based on an expert. This is the important basis that's being argued, that's being debated, and increasingly accepted. You can no longer, and we've done experiments. There are very experienced translators. They look at a piece of translation, oh, that's wrong. Mine must be right. And then when they look at the statistics, they say, oh, yeah, I'll go with the masses. This is what provides a basis for it. So there's one kind of, that's from English to Chinese. Chinese English is the same. 过滤装置, filter, filtration device, filter arrangement, filter unit. There are different renditions of the Chinese into the English. Again, there are different renditions. Most common 过滤装置 is just filter. That's so commonly used. So this provides an objective basis. And still, there are cases where you do not. That's not quite. You might want to vary from that. So to show you the magnitude of the problems, let me give you 凹槽. What anyone would have suggestion for the translation in English? You familiar with the term? Anyone technical background? In our database, we have quite a lot. In fact, in the we call multiple renditions. Growth, recess, plural growth, notch, indentation, recess portion, trenches, very low percentages. So there are different renditions for this term. This is very, very important. In fact, when you look at the database, this usage frequency, we have terms that are related to this growth 凹槽, 323 terms in a database in various combinations. So this is the magnitude of the problem. This is why there's so much room for the different variations. So let me then, what is the basis for us to talk about big data to help this? This is where we're taking the big data approach. Big data is not easy to find. Nowadays, you can, in the internet, things are free. You can get infinite amount of data, but that's not good. The data must be curated in a proper way before in the cultivation process. So I will compare the development of big data to the mining of jade. Jade, you look at in the countryside, it's just rocks. You know which are the good rocks are relevant. Just like when we deal with our database, we started with about 1.3 billion characters, Chinese and English, in a Chinese English. Then gradually we filtered them. We came out with 300,000 patents, English and Chinese, that we know they are comparable from that. So from rocks, you do selection, and now you come with the greenish rocks for jade. And we further reduce it to 45 million parallel sentences. So from the parallel patents, we take out parallel sentences. The parallel sentence, what we mean is that it's not exactly sentence, it's a string of Chinese characters and a string of English characters. The probability of their happening 100% of the time, then there's a match. Then the machine next time, it does not have to understand the language. It will just replace it. That's how it is done in a very brute force method of doing it. So gradually using from the patents, you get to the sentences. From the sentences, you refine them. And then from the sentences, you come up with terms, like what we had just now, filtration. Gradually, you find the terms and you find the variations. So it's a very tedious process. It took my PhD student initially 7 years to come to get from the big data to the 300,000 patents and then gradually work forward. Happily, he's managed, graduated, and he's making good money at Google. Okay, so this gives you an idea of the enormity of dealing with this kind of big data. It's not an easy task. If you do not deal with it carefully, you'll find a lot of rubbish, just like data. So likewise with mining, jade or other kinds of precious metal. So finally, you can have the beautiful the data, the really gem useful data. So now, let me talk about, we talk about quality assessment. Now let's talk about quality assurance. How do you do quality assurance? The quality assurance means after you get your Google Translate output, there are what measures you can help to deal with the last mile before it is fully useful. That's post-editing. And so how do you go? First, you identify what are the alternate renditions for possible term in a text. Which ones have multiple terms? So that means you put exercise choice. So what the system should provide for you in a post-editing, in the quality assurance phase is that should show the alternate renditions and the frequency. This is what we call lexical scan. You scan the document, you should be able to identify those terms that are technical, that have alternate renditions. The next thing you have to, because you may be a Shakespeare scholar, you know English and Chinese very well, but you don't know much about biotechnology. So the terms are not familiar to you. So you should be able to tell you not just the top frequency and secondary frequency, but also give you examples. You can look at examples and then understand what they are, then make the choice. Then finally, there's something further enhancement where we call fuzzy search. I probably should not spend time on this at this time. Then what this means is the difference between traditional assessment, new assessment. Traditional is based on individual gold standards. The new one is massive objective usage-based standard that I talk about. And on that basis, proceed further. So let me go quickly with the pipeline translation. Oh, half an hour already, okay. So what we need to do is there should be easy lookup of technical terms and multiple renditions. There should be reliable information to help decide among the alternate renditions, and a useful, authentic usage context to help the final decision. And then should be augmentation, dynamic maintenance of the database. You cannot stop today and think it'd be useful 10 years from now. The science and technology fields develop very quickly. They have to be updated. Okay. So manpower refinement, also we need manpower requirement to be refined. The translators in the future are very different from the past. They need sophisticated knowledge, but not just the subject knowledge. They have to have post-editing knowledge and familiarity using tools. And of course, in terms of resources, they have to maximize the automation process and minimize human input. Otherwise, it's extra cost. There has to be a cost benefit there. And there's long-range investment in planning and in planning. Yeah, I can skip this part. It's a bit complicated. Maybe I should go. This is, for example, you look at the terms here in terms of outlet, port, aperture, vent, opening, sprout, exit. All these have to deal with a transition from one place to another in terms of exit. And these are Chinese terms, English terms. But in fact, if you look at the Chinese terms, there are a lot of corresponding terms, but it's not a one-to-one correspondence. Some map from one map to the other. But what is important is that in the past, I think when you were in school, you probably taught to match, a dog as gao in Cantonese, but it's one-to-one matching, but in fact not. Neurologically, linguistically speaking, the lexical terms, these are networks, semantic networks. Dog versus the wolf, there are certain connections. And dog versus canine, again, there are other connections. So these are what we call semantic networks, but knowledge graph can use this. But I won't go into this, it's complicated to go through it. Okay, so let me come to the concluding remarks. about 45 minutes, right? Okay. So a few things. So patents are very important for balanced economic development in tech-oriented societies now. You cannot get away from it. It is you don't see it, but it impacts on all of us, as you have seen just now when I referred to Trump and Xi Jinping's tussles, okay? Then patents, they are language specific and country specific. It cannot be what's applicable in one country to another. It has to go through the media language. Then the new maturing technology are based on big data and generative AI. They bring new business opportunities and challenges in patent management. And the cross-lingual process in Chinese-English patents is a really important and ripening field. It may be even the cause of war someday if it comes to be serious. Then the top challenges are, one is quality assessment, whether we move quickly, efficiently from subjective assessment to objective-based assessment, and quality assurance, the introduction of AI mediated post-editing that I refer to, like scanning the text to obtain the background information, like its alternate renditions and the frequency of usage, and then availability examples to help it, and then of course incorporating as part of the word processing system. Then the translation industry now, I wonder whether you are aware of it, is really facing turmoil. It's facing reorganization. So in the past, there are very few translators, they say, that is not using machine translation of some kind. They're cheating and tell you they do it entirely by hand. Just now, nobody washes clothes by hand anymore, except for very fine material. They all use some mechanical automatic means. So the future in the translation landscape basically is that the translators in future, they become post-editors. They look at the machine output and they try to make the best to improve on it to be so that it's acceptable. So there's increasingly efficient and innovative tools available, more and more needed to manage the patent field. I think with that, maybe I could stop. If you have any questions, I'd be happy. Here, if you're interested in exploring our system, we have two systems. PatentLex is for you to check up on terms. PATA is where you also do post-editing. You know, the information I showed just now are available here. And okay, thank you. Thank you. I wonder whether I should ask Dickie to do a short demo first or answer questions. Okay. So what we do is try to show you online what we can access in terms of program that we have developed through the ITC support. Thank you. This, if you go into the page, it's very easy. Put your name, put your own password, and then you can go and try it.
Hello. First thing sure we need an account, so we should sign up my account in here, and I'm pretty sure that everyone knows how to sign an account, so I just go to log in my account. So this is what PATA look like, and we can import TMX file here, and if we are not a professional translator, we can also input text in here, the text box. And let me just get an example text first.
So you can take a passage and put it in the box, and it will do automatic translation for you by one of the systems. This could be Google, could be Bible and others. It's free for now, unless you have a big quantity, then it'll be a different method. So that output, you can use that output and check in terms of scanning for alternatives and what they can do.
Yeah, once we are logged in, we can paste our English or Chinese text into the input box and select either Google or our the other system. We have new chance to translate, and this time I will choose Google. And Pata will process it and display at this box. We call it a post-edited message translation box, and we can scan our text, use the LexiScan to see the professional terms in our database, and we can edit in different segments by this button. Yeah. And this time we will look at these sentences, and we can see our database have scanned these terms, and we can click on it and show the is English translation. And and this time we will look at these terms, 血糖, the blood sugar. We can see that the Google translation have translated it to blood sugar, but blood sugar is not a very professional terms, and maybe we will think that the blood glucose is a more suitable word for the 血糖 translation. So
in technical literature, you will not say blood sugar, it's blood glucose. This is what it shows, the database. So a machine translation like Google gives you blood sugar.
yeah, but even though we think that blood glucose is a more suitable word, but we are not sure, then we can just click the show example. We can search for the exact match in the database to see if it is a good rendition or not. So you can see that here is the example of blood glucose, and yeah, it sounds right. So then we can just click replace to replace the original terms, and it will show our changes in translation segment change box. So, and if we can see more example, we can also do the fuzzy search, and we can see 血糖 is translated as glucose in blood here. So we can take it as an example too. And when we finish our editing, we can either keep making changes in other segments, or we can output it in different file types, like CSV or TMS file for the professional translators, or just plain text. Yeah, and it's pretty much is a demo. So
it gives you a very simple idea of what can be done. This is only the beginning part. In future, what this will be done will be semi-automatically. You press the key, it will show you the preferred item in terms of statistical preference, and then you can decide whether you want to take it on. So this is part of the quality assurance process that is necessary, that I hope we are providing a glimpse into what the future will do. I mean, this is like incorporating it into part of the word processing system. Okay. If any questions?
So if I understand that correctly, so does that mean that the new terms is developed by you?
No.
No, our system can go with any system. You can go with Google, you go with Baidu, you can go with DeepL, but we provide two systems now that you can use. We have we pay Google, and we are affiliated with Nutrien. Nutrien is one of the youngest and up-and-coming systems in China with whom we are partnering. So there are others. So you heard about different, you can be Word file, could be in TMX, which is specialized terminal format, the different formats we can use. Text file, Word file, I think it's all okay now.
So for the post-edited translation, so is that provided by your system?
So you take an input text, and you can select any system to do the translation. Then you want to check the quality. You want to see whether you can improve on it. And you can use our method. We use our big data to tell you what the terms are. And then you can decide whether to replace it or not. And this is what we provide at the end.
So where does your big data come from? So the internet or
No,
you have like
maybe I can show you the. I guess I spoke too quickly. More than 10 years ago, we were looking around with you've seen in the beginning, patents began in the 1800s, late 1800s, but nobody has really looked at that systematically. So our data is we look at the Chinese patents filed in China, patents filed in America, and we try to find which ones match. Now it's easier to do it, but initially they don't. You don't know which one matches which one. There has to be different ways of finding and matching ones. This is how we got in the big data. So from several years of search, we start out with about 150,000 pairs, roughly 300,000 patents, half in English, half in Chinese, and they are comparable. They know that from that, we extract when patents are comparable, we extract the sentences. I said, sentences being defined as strings of characters. There's a string of characters in English, string of characters in Chinese. Statistically, they occur together. Then they have perfect match. Sometimes maybe 95%. Then we have to do different ways of massaging it and looking for it. That's how we got our data. So we now have about 1 million terms with multiple renditions. That's quite a lot already. It shows that we can deal with most new patents at least 60, 70% of the time. There's still new terms we don't have. I mean, for example, when we did it, there was no COVID-related problems, no electric vehicles. Those terms we don't have, but that we can develop. I understand from Professor Lee that you are all budding entrepreneurs. Maybe you could offer us opinions, suggestions. It's been hard for us to get to this stage.
I'm just thinking because patent documents are very professional. So I do see the niche here, so which is very different from ordinary translation. Because the Google Translate comes from internet. So that is just like a more common language. But if I decide to start a company like that, so I would probably ask, so this is a niche market, but if Google decided to do this, how can I compete with Google?
Google, they do have this data, but they do not partition the data. You know, for example, our specialization is that we deal with this kind of data. We really go deeply into it. So for example, take the word multiplication in Chinese, in English. What is it in Chinese? Anyone? Sorry? Yeah. What is it in Chinese? Cheng? Yeah. Cheng, that's interpreting in a mathematical sense, is a precise replication, right? 三乘4, something say, is 3, 4 times. But you talk about biologically, that's not precise. It's just reproduction. So they have to be partitioned. This is where the linguistic background comes in. This is why Google cannot get it right. They do not do that partition, right? They might come up with one man. Take another word like systemically and systematically. They got that all wrong. But from our data, we can select that systemically means pervasively, whereas systematically just means there's a regularity in the process. It may not be all embracing. So these are things that will be required when you deal with patents. This is where, like you said, the specialization comes in there.
Do we have any questions from our team members?
May I ask a question?
Please.
So from what I understood is that you use a lot of statistics in the middle to find the best matches that can like best fit in that context. But it seems that they're all based on historical data, and also those already published in the patent database. But we know that lots of like new technology, they might have like some emerge of the new jargon, new terms. And how do you make sure that this system gonna work well for like, new common technology and terms like that?
Well, let me say, this is not perfect. Nothing is perfect, we know, right? There's always room. So you're raising a very important question of past data as well as new ones. In the past, we make the provision for consistency. Some company, some enterprise, they want this term to be translated this way. If a document is translated using the first rendition, you want it to be consistent. That's the decision by the consumer. So that's one thing that can be done easily. But you're talking about new terms, then we have to continue to update ourselves. As I said before, when we began working, there was no electric vehicle, right? We do not have, batteries, things we do not have it. So we have to update it. And this is, we are applying to the government again to see, to get more funds to continue in that. And in fact, they asked us whether we would be interested in that. So it's, in technology and science, you cannot stop. You must keep up with this, with the progress. So there are new technologies you must maintain, look for patents. For us, it's easy because patents provide the source of this kind of terms, right? If you base it on newspaper, anything could come up. But what is important is in the official, well-recognized, professional, base, you have to use that to do it. Our research showed that, for example, in Chinese, how many words do you think we need to know to be able to be literate? Any guesses? 6,000 characters or words? Characters. Okay, our research showed that to be able to read 80% of the newspapers, words in the newspaper, if you can read 80%, I guess you have a fair enough comprehension, right? To do that, in any place, whether you're Beijing, Taiwan, Hong Kong, you need only about 3,000 to 4,000 most commonly used words. But those words used in Beijing may not be the same words used in Hong Kong and Taipei. They overlap, but not all entirely. So it's really, in our research, 25 years of news media from Hong Kong, Beijing, Taiwan, Singapore, Macau, altogether, you have about 1.5 million words almost. But all you need is really only about 3,000 to 4,000 common words. You want to read 90%, it will go up to 10,000 words. But what is interesting is that for professionals, it will go up to 50,000. Doctors, professors, some professors, not all, me excluded, I guess. Doctors, engineers, they will have a lot more, much larger repertoire. But our database shows that we have 600-some thousand words in each place over 20 years. And most of those words are technical terms. They appear once or twice, some are very common. Blood glucose appears as a common language, but not as frequent as a word like dog or cat. So this is there are general statistical properties of language. They're limited, so we can monitor it and we can go with it as it grows. And some sectors develop more quickly. I mean, batteries, the terminology related to batteries, electric vehicles has been really mushrooming in the last few years.
Sorry, just
Please.
one more follow-up question because I'm very interesting. You mentioned that this is a very niche area, like English, Chinese, Chinese, English. But even within Chinese, we have, for one specifically, in Hong Kong, traditional Chinese, mainland, something
No
like
problem.
Chinese. And then sometimes, for example, store in Hong Kong, they call it Xidong. But in mainland, we call it Dianzi. So, for example, like a situation like that, how do you deal with that in your system?
Well, right now we deal with English and Chinese. Fortunately, not Chinese. I know exactly the problem you're talking about. It's a complex issue in the sense that in the Chinese language world, there are overlaps and non-overlaps. For example, in mainland China, when they talk about matching, 相亲, they say, 有房没有, right? In Hong Kong, they say, 有房冇. They think you're crazy. 有屋冇, right? In Hong Kong. So there are that kind of variation. But then in the Chinese language, you have 房屋 as a term. That's a syllabic term in the learned language. So there are issues like that we can identify, we can work with. I mean, right now, there are already, for example, various programs that will automatically convert your text from, they will look for mainland words and substitute into Hong Kong or Taiwan words if it's for the Taiwan audience. But they're not good enough. Their attempts are already made. It's just how large a context you look for before you deal with it as well. Yeah, that's a very, very good question. Please. Can you speak a bit louder?
How eager are you to develop this tool to perfection in the future? Because if it really reaches to a point where we can assure like the quality of translations like humans, then it will essentially like displace a lot of translators on this.
So how eager are we to really make it available, make people adopt? I think that's usually when you talk about, I think in an entrepreneurial context, you have to find a niche, you have to find people who would accept it. And in our case, we'll be talking with patent attorney offices and agencies. They find our system useful for them to do this check. So we have to deal with it quickly, I mean, slowly for them to develop. We were at the Hong Kong Intellectual Property Department. They deal with patents. They have not heard of such things. They find it interesting. They can advise you. So what you're talking about is marketing. That's something we do not know enough about, but we're working hard. We offer free for people to try. And there are people trying it. And then they give us feedback about where errors, where improvement can be made, and we make it. This is not something we learn as academics, but this is something you have to learn as practical entrepreneurs. You have to meet the needs of your users, or your clients, not what you think is the best. This is what we are trying hard, and we've gotten this far. A big project. We hope we'll go on another project. Please.
So you mentioned how there have been variations in the terms used in patents over time. So I was wondering if, with the new technology, you would foresee the terms and the vocabulary used both for the original language and the new language, the translated language, so with patents. Do you see it becoming more homogeneous over time as people use technology to write or translate?
Yes and no. I think this is the beauty of language. You cannot always make it homogenized. There has to be variation. So for example, let me ask you the term meaning in Chinese. 今非昔比，今非昔比. it a positive? Does it offer positive or negative connotations? Negative. How many of you from Hong Kong? How many of you from mainland China? Okay, but without going into details, what our results show that in Hong Kong and Taiwan, 今非昔比, 今非昔比 has a greater probability of being negative. Whereas in mainland China, Beijing and Shanghai, have greater probability of being positive. And we went into focus group and asked people, very simple, people in China say, look at 20 years ago how we live, the conditions, right? Now look at the fancy homes, the cars we drive and the standard of living. And whereas in Taiwan and Hong Kong, people are worried about Hong Kong and all that. It's a very different story. So it's like you can project your feelings onto language. Because by itself, 今非昔比, 今非昔比 has no connotations, right? It's neutral. It's the words that are usually used in different locations. So what this means is in Hong Kong, in Taipei, they tend to be used more frequently with negative words with negative connotation than positive one. And in China, it's the other way around. That's what it is. That's how language is. And as lawyers, you should be interested in how that you have to follow that. Otherwise, you might get the wrong impression, the wrong implications. Does that answer your question?
Oh, I have a question. Would you have like self-customizing function?
Sorry?
Like self-customize? Like for example, for a word, it has like two Chinese translations, and they are like similarly professional. Would you allow customers to like choose?
Sure.
Like, which one or she would prefer? And then
The ultimate system should have a lot of toggles that the customer can choose. They want consistency in terminology. Once they have shown certain one, you always use that. That would be one way to allow for that. But I think there has to be some degree of sophistication because, as I said, multiplication could be in different contexts, be rendered differently. You have, first of all, you've got to objectively allow that to be distinction to be made. And then you have, where there are true variations, you can choose. The difference between systemic and systematic is much more subtle. People don't get it. And in fact, you probably can let it go by. But if it's in certain documents in a technical legal sense, it's not because, as I said, systemic means pervasive. But systematic just shows there's a regular system. So systemic situations involve regularity like systematicity, but systematicity does not imply systemic system. So there has to be increasing sophistication, the recognition of the language properties in it. Please.
Just a comment, and I will echo this question the previous comment that maybe wanted to do that one say, whenever I see this word, I want to always translate it to so on top of that, do you see the potential on further
Compartmentalization.
these sort of specific words into more specific?
Sure. Thank you. The patents, according to the patent conventions, they are very complex and archaic system. You can have 30, 40 different cases, but most people are just interested in generalized ones. They are interested in computer science, they're interested in biotechnology. They don't want to separate it between, chemistry, pharmaceutical, and other. So we have to, this is partly science, this is why in Chinese, science is called 科学. It's the science of classification. This is a very important aspect that we have to deal with. And it's increasingly necessary to deal with. As we have as our use of language become more sophisticated, we have to undertake more sophisticated background preparation for that.
All right, do you have any questions from? So if not, before we finish, yeah, I need to check if we have any question from our audience online. All right, we do have some question.
Oh,
So Professor Tsou, so you can see the question as well. So I think we got this from James Jia. So how to determine whether the English and Chinese patents are comparable? So how do you know that is the same technology of filing patents simultaneously in United States and mainland China?
it becomes a lot easier now than before. Now you can trace the patent numbers. Every patent would have at least one identification number, and that is sometimes related to the patent family, and you can step by step track it more easily now. But when we first started out, they don't have that. The patent convention only came in the 90s. Before that, there were none. In fact, before that, there some patents between Chinese and English. Some of them started in Sweden. They were Swedish, translated into English and into Chinese, but we were able to identify them. So the other way we approach, another approach is like I said just now, we use the similar ways like we deal with plagiarism. You translate this Chinese patent into English in some way and compare that with the English patents you suspect are related, and you find a match. This is how it's mathematically, statistically done. You can do that.
Thank you.
So that answers that question.
Right, and all right, so Grace asked about the QR code again.
We can find QR code. It's on screen now.
All right, do we have any other question from our online audience? If not, then I would like to invite everyone here and our online audience to thank Professor Tsou for the wonderful sharing.
Thank you.